All right, fantastic. So my name is Vanessa Wallace. I am here with Canadian Women in Sport. Really lucky to have all of you here today and be able to share this phenomenal content with you, developed in partnership with Canadian Parks and Rec Association and Recreation Nova Scotia. Our facilitator this morning is Gabrielle Riley Gallagher. So she precedes me at Canadian Women in Sport. She's been a facilitator with our team since prior to 2014. Right now, she is a senior analyst on the climate change and clean transportation team with Nova Scotia Department of Energy and Mines. But her permanent position is as a recreation consultant for the Nova Scotia government. And she has over 15 years with the government and specifically with sport and recreation. So we're really lucky to have her today. And I'm under the impression a lot of you do know her, so that's great as well. And with that, welcome to Retaining Girls in Sport and Recreation and Physical Activity. So a little bit on the history of this partnership and this workshop. As you know, in 2018, the government in Canada announced a target to achieve gender equity in sport at every level by 2035. And so this project really looks to achieve that by looking at the different populations and how they engage in sport and recreation. This session is part of a workshop series, a nationally wide workshop series that's now been moved to virtual, but hopefully in a non-COVID world, we will be able to be in the same room and get to engage and discuss these topics. Gabrielle can do a great job about talking about the history of this document or framework and the role that Nova Scotia played in developing it. But this workshop is really going to hit a lot of these goals. So with goal 1, fostering active living through physical recreation, inclusion, so increasing inclusion and access to recreation for populations that face constraints and barriers. Supportive environments, so we actually go on to talk about that quite a bit and how it plays the role in positively engaging girls and retaining girls in sport and recreation. And then lastly, building capacity. So, what else has arrived? So before I pass it over to Gabrielle, just to let you know a bit about our roles this afternoon, she is going to be bringing all of this great content to life, and I'll be in the back end supporting with any of the technology or issues that you may encounter. So please send me a message if you are having trouble with any of the features, you get booted out, or you're experiencing any difficulties. I'll be able to help you out with that. So without further ado, Gabrielle, I'd love to pass over the torch your way.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Vanessa, and big hello to everyone. Before moving forward anymore, I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're in Mi'kmaq, the traditional and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We'd also like to acknowledge that the underrepresentation of Indigenous women and girls in sport in this country and the multiple barriers that they face to participation at all levels is a priority for the Canadian women in sports and is a focus of their intention to continue to build relationships that allow us to better address this gap through our work. So I really do appreciate that Women in Sport has identified that as a focus area. So I'm so pleased to get to connect with you all today. As Vanessa said, she's going to be in charge of the tech, which I'm so pumped about. And I get to do what a lot of people say I can do best, having the nickname Gaddy, is talk a bit. We'll be using a lot of different functions on Zoom, so we will walk you through it. It's going to be a rather engaging for a webinar, so make sure that you have your ears tuned in because we will call on you to help contribute to the conversation today. I would like to say, for those of you that I've gone to work with in the past, it's really wonderful to get to see you. And for those that I haven't gotten the chance to work with you, I did get a chance to see the registration list, and there are some new names on there. So I look forward to getting to work with you in the future. As Vanessa said, I've worked in sport rec in the physical activity sector my entire career. And the impact and the potential of sport, recreation, and physical activity, I've been passionate about my entire life. So I really appreciate the opportunity that Canadian Women in Sport, CPRA, and specifically Recreation Nova Scotia have made during their virtual learning series to dedicate some time into this. I'd also like to thank everyone for showing up today. We all have probably, dozens and dozens of virtual meetings and opportunities that we could have signed into today. So thank you for zoning in to create this part of your intention for the day. So let's begin by looking at our agenda for today. We'll be going over quite a bit of material today. We'll be looking at national research as well as publications. A big shout and push for everyone to go check out the Canadian Women in Sport website. They continue to have and carry the tradition of the name of cause by being a go-to resource for incredible continual learnings for those working in the sector of sport, recreation, physical activity around gender equity. So I encourage you to go check them out. We'll be doing some welcome and introductions, and as well as a bit of an icebreaker to get you familiar with some of the Zoom functions. And then we'll be going into looking at what some of the current circumstances in Canada look like. We'll be setting the context with some foundational terms and looked how they can be used as lenses, as well as dipping into some of the influential factors for participation for girls and women in sport, recreation, and physical activity, and then translating into that to some tangible design opportunities for our programs. It's important to note, if, as Vanessa said, if you have any questions or any tech things that pop up, you can throw it in our chat box. We'll be both monitoring it. As well, it's really important at this point to say, in Nova Scotia, we often use the term sport as a broad meaning of sport, recreation, and physical activity. And that's the context to which we'll be speaking to sport today. So if you do see sport show up, think of it in a broader context. And we'll be making sure that there's time at the end for some questions. So first things first, getting to know one another. We're going to be following some best practices for respect and inclusion, and we're going to ask you to rename yourself today. So using the right click on either your video or right click your name in your participant tab, we're going to ask you to rename yourself with your preferred name, your pronouns, as well as telling us where you're calling in from. So we'll give you about 20 to 30 seconds for that. And Vanessa, if you're seeing the full participant list, you can give me a thumbs up if it looks like we've reached success in that area.
Yep, I'm seeing a couple people have it. Amazing. I love seeing where everybody is calling in from. I think that's so great.
Yeah, and it's I should focus that we are focusing the content to Nova Scotians. However, it is great to see that we have folks joining us from outside of the province. So welcome. All right, we're going to kick right into it with poll number one. So poll number one, we'd like to ask you, were you inspired to be physically active or play sports growing up by which of the following? One, a family member, two, a professional athlete, three, an educator, or four, you weren't really involved in physical activity growing up. And I think Vanessa's going to launch a poll on this.
Sorry, I'm having a technical difficulty. It will just be one moment. I think we'll move on to the chat storm first.
Okay, so we have more than one poll, so don't worry, you will get to you will get to do polls at some other point. We're going to jump right into our chat storm. So what do you hope to get out of the session today? And for those of you who haven't done a chat storm before, basically use your chat function. You can do it, make sure you hit the everyone tab, and share with us what you'd hope to get out of this session today. And although we aren't in person, because if we were in person, I could really use my eye contact to ensure that we're getting some feedback from you. I would really like you to share with us, and I'll try to hit up the region, so I won't pinpoint anyone or put them on the spot, but we would love to hear from every different region in the province. So looking at, oh, thank you. We're starting to hear from our chat storm. So a new concept or a refresher, an understanding of how you keep young girls in sport or recreation when they move into that adolescent stage. Be inspired, learn something, some takeaways, some inspiration, some research. Awesome. New partnerships. I will say it is great to see so many people logging on. There's a lot of names that have connected with the Canadian Association of Women in Sport and Physical Activity in the past. So it's great to rebuild that connection under the new name of Canadian Women in Sport. There are some women in leadership facilitators that have logged on as well. So shout out to those. Vanessa, I'm seeing the poll. Does that mean that the poll's ready to?
The polls are back.
Yay,
they evaded me for a moment, but now they're back. So please feel free to answer. We have the first poll up, which is, I was inspired to be physically active or play sports growing up by. So please take a moment to fill that out. We'd love to find out who launched your passion for sport and physical activity.
If anyone's having trouble seeing some of the polls, you can let Vanessa know. All right, so interesting tech piece is that I'm not seeing the poll on my screen, but I am seeing it on my phone.
Interesting. So can you speak to the results that you see?
Yeah, that's I am hoping that most of people are able to see the poll. So the majority of respondents noted a family member as an inspiration to be physically active or playing sports. Up next would be an educator. There were 0 who noted a professional athlete, and a lower number around folks who were not involved in physical activity growing up. So wonderful to see, and I think that's really goes to show the importance of family and connection on the East Coast, and how that can be such a huge contributing factor. I guess we're going to skip that second poll, and we're going to move right into the workshop objectives. So now that we've done a couple engagement activities, and thank you so much for everyone who shared in the chat box, I'm going to scroll back through it and check it out. So now that we've completed that, the main objectives of this 90-minute workshop is to really focus in on some of the foundational concepts with a bit of a practical application. So introduce foundational knowledge about gender equity in the context of sport, physical activity, and youth development, to increase understanding of the influences on girls' participation in sport and physical activity, as well as build knowledge of how to holistically design programs to meet the needs of women and girls. My goals with you today are to connect you with some great resources, which we'll showcase quite a few of today, as well as to remind you that you're not alone in this work. There's some incredible leaders in this province that are doing incredible work. But really it's up to each of us individually to start this work. And again, a big thank you to Recreation Nova Scotia and CPRA for supporting the continual learning around this. So for the next slide, setting the context, we're gonna define a few terms that help set the stage of understanding and significance with respect to gender equity in sport and physical activity. I'm also gonna start to introduce the annotate function. Vanessa, you can let me know if I'm doing well describing this. So the annotate function, for those of you who haven't used it, gives us the ability to actually place stamps or marks on the slide of the presentation. So for the next couple slides, we're going to actually ask you to get involved and show us your input by annotating the slide. So at the top of the screen on the view options function, there's a drop-down menu, and the third option would be annotate. Under annotate, it gives you the ability to pick stamps. And so for the next couple slides and some other slides later in the presentation, we're going to ask you to use an annotation to show us how familiar you are with the term or the approach or the lens. And so please use a check mark to show that you can clearly, this is a term you're very familiar with, you can clearly explain it, you feel very confident in it. A star if it's something that's kind of familiar, but a little curiosity and you want to learn more about it. And a question mark if it's a new concept. I'm starting to see some annotations, so thank you very much. So please use a stamp that best reflects your connection to the term. So for equality versus equity, this is a really important term, especially for gender equity, that we do want to dig into and help define. Often we see that this term is used interchangeably, where those of us who are a little more familiar with it really value and understand the importance of differentiating. With equality, for those of you, this is a new term. The image on the left, it's assumed that everyone will benefit from the same supports. In this case, the same bicycle. And in this case, on the left-hand side, everyone's being treated equally. So they're at the starting line with the same tools and resources. The second image on the right focuses in on equity. So individuals are given different supports. So in this case, different bicycles that make it possible for them, in this case, to bike. And they are being treated equitably. So I see quite a few check marks on there and a lot of stars, which is great. To dig in around gender equity, so when we apply this to gender equity, it's a process of allocating resources and programs and decision-making fairly. It doesn't mean that we're providing the exact same program to both girls and boys or individuals that identify as being male or female. Some girls or female activities may be the same as those offered to their male counterparts. However, some may be altered or some may be completely different based on the needs and the interests of those females. A great quick example of this is if there's a fee for a program, from an approach around equality and digging into equity a bit is, to make a program more equitable, you could take away some of the service fees for a program for individuals who need it. However, to take it a step further, digging into, and we'll touch on this a bit later, a policy piece or a layered piece around the systemic barriers is just taking out the service fee completely and offering a program at no cost. But we'll dig into that a bit later. We'll move on to our next term. Intersectionality. So a term used from Gender Equity as a Path to Performance, a great resource, is intersectionality is the interconnected nature of social categorizations that apply to an individual, creating overlapping and independent systems of discrimination or disadvantage. So intersectionality considers all the layers of individuals and their identity, and how that impacts their experience. I sometimes think of this as there are many hats. No one just wears one hat. It's important to note it's complex. It's sometimes visual, it's often not. And it's sometimes attached to disadvantages or discrimination. I'd also like to add, it also is attached to privileges at times. So you can see, using the lens and bringing the lens in of intersectionality, it's very important to think of this lens when programming. No, we can't treat all females as just one type of female. And I do want to point out at this point that Recreation Nova Scotia is under that goal area too of the National Recreation Framework. And in Nova Scotia, we've adopted that as our policy for recreation. Recreation Nova Scotia is really leading the way around focusing in on inclusion and access, and is doing work through their inclusion and access task team around applying intersectionality as an approach to how we do this work. Stay tuned for more information on that from Rec Nova Scotia. I see lots of annotations on there. I like the heart, whoever did that, and some question marks. So this is a new term for some. Sadly enough, it's seemingly just a new term to our sector, but I really do think that the recreation sector specifically gets this term and is stepping into it. Yeah, so we'll move on to our next term or our next approach. So through Sport Canada, we have the long-term development model. This is a really great model at looking at that lifelong experience and connection to sport. Recreation most certainly plays a huge role in supporting this lifelong connection to being active for life, as I like to call it. So often it's in traditionally recreation programs that we start to see that active start and fundamentals and learn to train, really supporting an individual on their first touch bases of gaining the fundamental movement skills and the confidence and competence of being engaged in physical activity, sport and recreation, and leading them down different pathways, whether it's training to competitive sport or being active for life. It's important to note that although this is a great model, and Sport Canada notes the important role that recreation and physical activity play in creating this pathway for individuals, it's really important to put some gender lenses on this model. And again, that layer of intersectionality to know that we can't just treat all individuals the same and put them through this model. I do want to touch on a couple really great resources that support this work around the long-term development and supporting individuals through the lifelong being active and connected with sport and physical activity. One is the supplemental resource for Canada Sport for Life, actively engaging women and girls addressing the psychosocial factors. Another one is a recent one from Canadian Women in Sport that we'll touch on later, and it's called She Belongs. And lastly, a great resource also found on Canadian Women in Sport called Leading the Way, LGBTQI2S, Inclusion in Sport. All really great ways to bring that intersectionality lens to how we do this work and ensure a lifelong connection to being active. All right, so bit of trivia. We're going to do a poll here, and please use the annotation function to showcase what your response would be for the following question. What percentage of Canadian girls are not participating in any kind of sport or physical activity? So we have 37%, 51%, 62%, or 74%. And I'll give you a couple more moments.
Okay, I think we can call it.
So really heavy on the bottom part of this graph here. So the correct answer is 62%, unfortunately. Across the provinces, it somewhat varies, but Nova Scotia is on par in the latest data that I've seen in the last couple of years as being on par with the rest of Canada in this area. I'd like to draw your attention to the Rally report. So this is a report, the data in this table is actually taken from this report in the Canadian Women in Sport. Vanessa, can you remind me, did this report come out this year?
Yes, April of 2020, and you'll receive a link to it as well.
Awesome. Another great resource. So the Rally report explores current Canadian trends in sport participation with a focus on the target group of girls ages 6 to 18. So we'll see on the left side of this chart, girls are more likely to participate if they're younger than 12 years of age, if they're able-bodied, Caucasian, South Asian, Asian, Black, any sexual orientation. Adversely, if we're looking girls who are even less likely to participate, it's that getting into that age group of 13 to 18 years old. If they're even less likely to participate if they have a disability, even less likely to participate if they're Indigenous, and so on, if their income's less than 50,000. So it really goes to show you, again, if we're narrowing in on the left and treating all females the same, we're only supporting some females. And again, we're contributing to the inequities among females. So it's really important to look at some of these intersecting factors. And again, that Rally report is available to support any more information you'd like to see on that. So it's really key to consider, again, intersectionality and bigger piece than just grouping all females the same. Getting into a second poll here, so please annotate. So the current Canadian landscape, what percentage of girls report that the quality of programming was a barrier to their participation? So we have 15%, 28%, 33%, and 43%.
I like how someone said none of the above and put a heart above the title. Okay, I think we can call it.
Okay, we're close. Again, we're close. Heavy on the bottom. The answer is 43%. So again, that's not great info. However, when we talk about the quality of a program, that is one of the biggest factors that we as program designers and decision makers in the sector do have control over. So although it's not a great result, it's something that we can work on, and we'll get into that a bit. So again, the Rally report, as you can see, nearly half the girls surveyed said the program quality was a barrier to their participation and continuation in sport. On the slide, you can see the various reasons of the quality of the program, why the quality of the program can be diminished. And fortunately, as I just said, these are within our control. So the sport or program is not appropriately designed for girls. The quality of leadership needs to be looked at. There's not enough positive role models, poor overall experiences, and this can be sport, but also can fall into recreation, physical activity. It could be too competitive. So 43% of adolescent girls identified these as their top factors. So let's continue our discussion on what factors impact girls' participation in sport and physical activity. So it's really key here to jump into, while jumping into some of the factors, to really highlight some of the benefits of girls participating in sports, so that power and potential of when we do have girls involved, and also equally what's at stake of them missing by not being part or not involved. So the benefits of participation of girls: improve physical health, improve mental health, higher self-esteem, increase in social competence, greater academic performance, strong leadership abilities, and more professional opportunities. It's almost a snowball effect of that greater health, confidence, competence, and that translates to other areas of the girl's life outside of sport, recreation, and physical activity. And in that fourth point, really hits home of, it translates to other areas of their life, including professional opportunities. This last point's really important to hit on as well: the better visibility for the next generation of girls. So in so many ways, and it's so important that we see girls in sport, recreation, and physical activity as participants, as leaders and coaches, and as decision makers, so they see themselves in that role, that see her, be her piece, so that we continually grow the next generation of girls and their involvement in sport, recreation, and physical activity. Again, more resources at Keeping Girls in Sport, the resource from 2018. This next model, I'm sure quite a few of you in the province, especially some of our physical activity folks, would be very familiar with: the social ecological model. So it's often with complex problems, especially behaviorally related. Looking at them from a more comprehensive or holistic approach allows us to better understand different touch points that we could either be supporting or that could be acting as barriers for girls. So some major influential factors. As we know, girls experience a lot of barriers to sport and physical activity. The social ecological model is a helpful way to look at the various layers of influence. It includes four spheres: interpersonal, intrapersonal, environmental, and policy related. The interpersonal sphere consists of anything a girl may think or feel that prevents her from participating in programs. It can be a result from internalized stereotypes like believing that a specific sport or activity is too rough for girls. And it's really that self-belief of I believe or I think or feel based on personal and social pressures on what they believe they can or can't do. The interpersonal sphere considers close relationships that influence a girl's understanding of the role of sport in their life. Does she have the emotional or economic support of her family to participate in sport? If we looked at one of our first polls, we saw the biggest response was around the family and how big the impact and influence of family had in all of us today in being involved in sport and physical activity. The next sphere is environment, and it considers the different access points to sport literally and figuratively. Are there programs available to her? Are they of high quality? Are there other girls in the program? Are there appropriate cultural measures that make it a place and space that's safe for a girl to be active? In addition to the right equipment, are there the right role models within the environment and in the coaching as well? And that a really heavy point in this is as well in the administration and decision makers. The last sphere is around policy. So the external structures that affect a community's access to quality programming. Is the program adequately funded? Is it held at the right time that girls can attend? Are there streams for girls to progress? A great policy example, and it is a bit of an old example because we are working on this in Nova Scotia, is having ice time for girls hockey, but only having it at like 11 p.m. on a Friday. So ensuring that the policies in place to support not just access, but equitable access to these activities. So we are going to use the chat box for this one. So reflecting a bit on barriers and drivers, I apologize because I haven't quite been looking at the chat box as well as I should been, but we can revisit some of those questions at the end of the presentation if any have popped up. So we're going to use the chat box in this activity, first focusing on that left column. So what are some factors that you believe limit girls and young women's experiences in sport, recreation, and physical activity? And we'll give you a couple moments for that. And Vanessa, thankfully, is going to bring to life and flip chart. I would usually call this flip chart it for us all. So thinking either from your own experience, from your own community, or from recent experiences or opportunities, what are some factors that limit girls and young women's experiences? So we're seeing that come in a bit. So funding, looking uncool from a peer, availability of appropriate equipment, bad coaching experience, self-esteem, financial, confidence, the opportunity and access, so rural or urban opportunities, not being told they're able, no peer or friend to join them, no peer, no friend, other girls' participation, sounds like a bit of a theme here. Sometimes in mixed gendered opportunities, being ridiculed by males, not an appropriate offering for the skill group, lack of home support, lack of female role models, too competitive. So, I mean, we're seeing lots of barriers and factors. Thank you for adding to that conversation. Perceived financials, another one. So flipping the page here, based on some of those factors that limit women and girls' experiences, we'd like to throw it out there. Let's highlight some of the factors that we know enhance girls' experiences, or some of the drivers. So this could be something that you're presently doing or that you would like to do, that you've heard would be a good area to focus. So strong role models, sense of belonging, family participation, cultural beliefs, a positive physical education experience, the ability to contribute and make their own decisions, early exposure, so those early ages of opportunities, having input in the programming, affordability, friends on the team, targeted sport rec programming in a co-ed environment, social connections. Wow, it's a talkative group, Vanessa. You're a fast typer. Bring a friend to an open door. Girls only programming. These are all wonderful. I don't think I've heard from anyone in Cape Breton. Any Cape Bretoners or Highland region? I see Fundy, Central, Valley. Correct competition level. All right, so thank you again for contributing to the discussion. As I said to Vanessa, This isn't a new topic in Nova Scotia, and luckily we have a lot of great leaders across the province that are zoned in and continually working on this. Equipment that works for a female body. That's a great one to add. All right, I think we're, thank you for flip charting, Vanessa. All right, so looking at some of those barriers and some of those drivers, a great report, again, we've named already in this presentation, is Keeping Girls in Sport. And they looked at the top reasons girls give for leaving and staying sport. Again, this translates to physical activity and recreation. So the top areas are around time commitment, financial barriers, injuries, and they just don't enjoy it anymore. It's also really important. Do we still have some of the positive factors? I'm going to hit on some of the positive factors as well. While trying to mitigate reasons for leaving, it's also really important to enhance what supported their positive experience as well. So like positive team dynamics, trying hard, positive leadership, and we'll dip into some examples of that later on. So for design, this is where we start to translate and put this into some practical application. In the next section, we're going to cover how you as program leaders or decision makers can address these barriers and have a positive impact on the girls in your community. So designing for girls. We know typically why girls leave. We just touched on that. And what motivates girls to stay and play. So some of the benefits. Let's look at some of the evidence-based solutions that you can apply to support ongoing participation and retention in our programs. They've been narrowed down to 4 areas. So consultation, building supportive environments, fostering fun, and preventing injuries. And we'll dig into those. We'll dig into these individually. So consultation, consult with your staff, your community, your participants, and other organizations. As mentioned, consultation is key to offering programs that are appropriate and will benefit your community. We saw that in our chat box. Quite a few people said, input from girls or input from the community. I remember one opportunity that I had to travel throughout the province to support work at the community level for recreation, our sharing tour. It's continually important to really hear from community. And one of the learnings that I know I took away from that is that you can have an evidence-based best practice program to bring to community, but you really need to tailor it and have the input and the cultural appropriateness for a program. And that goes from everything from how you communicate about the program, who you have running the program as leaders, and who's making decision makers. So bringing some of that community input to the decision-making table when possible. A really key phrase that I'm sure some of you live by in recreation is nothing about us without us. Thank you, whoever just put up that star. Feel free to keep annotating on the slides throughout the presentation. This is a really building block of the community development approach that recreation takes for programming. We all know it's incredibly key. So key to reach out and connect. And an important area in bringing inclusion and access to life in this area is identify what voices are missing to give input to your programming and start to build those relationships. That old phrase, well, I put out a poster to get input, but I didn't hear from anyone, so I think it's okay. We all know that doesn't work. So you really need to build the relationship so that when you do put yourself out there to ask for input and engagement, that you have people that are interested and have their relationship with you and trust you so that they can share with you. So a couple key examples of where you can go around building some of those relationships. I know in the past, I've connected with community health boards. I've connected with local community nonprofits, because another key area in here is not just going to the same person and expecting them to be giving you input on every single program, and they're the same person that, you know, your coworker down the cubicle from you is going to for input on a program. Make sure that you're building relationships beyond just that one person approach, so that you're not overtaxing someone to be the voice of a community or a target audience. And if someone's recently surveyed that community, so often community health boards are a great go-to, or other partners within the community, because if they've gone and asked for input, they're a great resource to look at what they heard and found out instead of continual engagement. We will move on to building supportive environments. So when considering girls' motivations to participation, creating a social and emotionally safe place for your participations and staff must be a priority. A safe environment is not limited to the physical space and emergency procedures. This diagram, when I look at this diagram, I really think of a three-legged stool. You really need this holistic approach. A three-legged stool, if you have one of those legs missing, it doesn't work, it doesn't hold up. So it's really key to look at not just the physical environment, but the social environment and the overall health and mental well-being and engagement. In Nova Scotia, we've really started to see, you know, an increase in accessibility audits of the physical environments. A shout out to, you know, our fans and Rec Nova Scotia in this work. We've also seen more training for leaders. To highlight a really great resource that we do have available through some incredible trainers in Nova Scotia is the Aboriginal coaching module. It is offered through the CAC. However, it was developed by Indigenous coaches and leaders and experts to be delivered to non-Indigenous program leaders and coaches. And it's this approach of looking at holistically at the participant, looking at holistically at the environment, instead of just segmenting or siloing these environments to support an individual. It's an incredible module that I encourage all of you to look into. So again, three-legged stool doesn't work if it's missing a leg. To continue our conversation on building supportive environments, I'm going to highlight the resource She Belongs. Once again, it was put out this year through Canadian Women in Sport. It looks at social connection as a tool for retention of girls in sport. Specifically, it looks at the motivators comparatively for participants who identify as female versus those who identify as male. I'm seeing some hearts and some stars on there, wonderful. And how they reach that positive sport experience. So if we look at the left-hand side, girls are fueled by a social acceptance often. So when girls are feeling socially secure, then they're feeling free to increase their effort. They don't feel like making mistakes will affect their social relationships. So then they increase their effort, which increases their performance, and then followed by, you know, a positive sport or recreation or physical activity experience. It's really important, again, to bring that intersectionality on here and looking at this from the aspect of it's not just the individual, but really looking to the team as well. and the team dynamics in this factor. Comparatively, males typically, first comes, they put out the effort, and that leads to increased performance, which then in turn leads to social acceptance and a positive experience in sport. So you can see clearly that, you may want to approach a girl-specific program a bit differently than the areas that you'd focus in on for a male-specific program. So keep this in mind when we start to look at our programs, that heavy social acceptance factor. And we've seen that in also other Nova Scotia data on what influences females within communities through some of the physical activity and citizen surveys that we've had throughout the province. Social acceptance and bringing a friend, and you populated our chat box with all those comments that do highlight that driver of social acceptance. Moving on again with building supportive environments. So we really want to encourage here that safe and welcoming environment, encourage girls to value and say in sport throughout their lifespan. Again, I'm going to throw out that phrase, see her, be her. So, we had, lots of hearts down there. Wonderful. The importance of providing a positive experience and a lasting social connection, that in itself can be the driver regardless of what sport or physical activity it is. Exposing girls to strong and powerful female role models. And lastly, empower girls to strive for their full and equal position in sport and society. So we know through research that girls' involvement in sport and physical activity really translates to all other areas of their life and throughout their lifespan. So the longer that we can keep them involved and engaged, it has very meaningful impacts throughout their lifespan. I'm going to ask people, I see lots of hearts on there, but maybe to hear from folks, I want you to use your star and to do a bit of a democracy and vote on what you feel is the most impactful area to focus in on for building supportive environments. I'm going to give you 5 more seconds. Pull out those annotations. All right, wonderful. So we're seeing a lot around a positive experience and a social connection and exposing girls to strong and powerful role models. That's wonderful. Okay. Sorry, Vanessa has to clear the slide each time before we get to move on. So I'm glad that quite a few of you highlighted the role model piece. So again, from the resource She Belongs, some key ways to showcase role models and leaders are recognizing the role models they have in their life currently, allowing opportunities for that naturally within a program and really intentional opportunities. To watch and discuss and celebrate female athletes or leaders, to invite women coaches or mentors or community leaders into the program. And that's one that I'd really love to hear more examples of that happening in Nova Scotia. And referencing or naming the drill or the program after an athlete or a team. Just again, that bringing that connection, and also I'd throw in there that culturally specific in whatever region you're in, or a Nova Scotian example. That goes a really long way. Again, I'm going to ask you if you want to use your annotation function to highlight which of these is something that you maybe before you annotate. Maybe use a star on something, on a suggestion that you think is most impactful, and then a heart by something that you would like to try or do more of.
I've also done a little prompt in the chat. So if anybody wants to add a strong female leader in the sport and rec community to the chat, I would love to flood with everybody's responses there. Some people you might want to leverage in your programming going forward and prompting ideas in one another.
One thing to plug here is we're really lucky in this province to have some regional female leadership networks. As far as I'm aware, we have the Fundy Female Leadership Network, the Valley Female Leadership Network, and the South Shore has kickstarted one up as well. And they do an incredible job of showcasing some local female leaders and providing opportunities for those female leaders to share and connect their story. So if you haven't connected with your local regional network or another region's local network, you really should. I encourage you. So we see a lot of hearts around areas that you'd like to maybe try or do more of, and quite a few stars. So again, really pumped to see, not surprised that you're doing work in this area. Okay, now for anyone who knows me, knows that this is a huge area to support girls and impacts girls staying in the game, staying and playing, right? So fostering fun. When surveyed, girls noted positive team dynamics, getting to put effort in and try something hard, and positive coaching as the 3 indicators of a fun experience. I really encourage you to think of a time or think of some of these fun factors that really have encouraged you or encouraged girls in your communities to stay in the game. And we're going to dig into these a bit. So for positive team dynamics, girls want to feel emotionally secure. We've talked about how important a socially supportive learning environment is for their engagement and for them to continually show up. They want opportunities to develop and build healthy relationships and feel competent in skills and translating those into new activities. So leaders really need to integrate that social piece and some unstructured time into programs to give girls the space and place to build those relationships and that security of it's a safe place for them to try something different. Team dynamics, we all know, are so important. And leaders need to provide opportunities for participants to highlight other successes and efforts. That's a great way to bring some of that opportunity, not just to a program leader or coach, but within the team, so that everyone knows that they're a part and a contributing factor to creating that positive experience for everyone and the team dynamic. The next one we're going to dig into is trying hard. So girls want to participate in quality sport programming, quality rec programming. They want to learn new skills, improve through intentional skill building, and sometimes compete or, do an exhibit or whatever that translates to, so that they really, put themselves out there and challenge themselves. Leaders must ensure competence in FMS, fundamental movement skills, that they lead activities that are developmentally appropriate for the age group and range of the girls, and that they create an environment that encourages risk-taking and setting of goals. And I really want to throw it out there for you to think about it. When was the last time that you did something that you didn't think that you were able to do? Think about it for a second and really, I hope, and my hope for you is that it really was transformational. And to go back to the word recreation, I love breaking it down to the recreation And these opportunities of getting to try hard or doing something that you didn't think you could do or putting yourself out there, that's what recreation or recreation is all about, that you create this newer, this higher expression of yourself. And moving on to positive coaching, positive leadership. Girls want to feel valued and included by their leader. You know, we all think of the difference and the impact of a leader knowing a participant's name and how far that goes. They want to be able to make new friends and be empowered to say in sport, recreation, and leadership, and translating that even into the decision making and administration of these opportunities. So leaders must include participants' voices, teach with patience and encouragement, and to lead by example. And getting to a last area of impact is for programming is preventing injury. This is I will preface this is somewhat seen as pretty sport specific. However, again, that the three-legged stool, we really want to make sure that we have that safe environment. And when we give girls these opportunities to be out there, active, take risks, injury prevention is another area. Three specific areas under injury prevention is the mechanical injury, the energetic injury, and the psychosocial injury. Girls and young women are sometimes at a greater risk of experiencing some of these. So again, it's really important that as leaders, we go out and get the training and have the support on site to mitigate a lot of these potential injuries, but also to support girls to lessen the chances of these happening. And so we'll dig in a bit to taking preventative measures. So a great resource would be a safe sport e-module. And again, that definition of sport being really broad, a lot of recreational programs have this physical activity sport opportunity. So dipping into some sport specific and safe sport modules speaks to the plethora of perspectives of creating a safe sport environment or safe recreation environment. Teaching fundamental movement skills to help prevent mechanical injuries. So again, that confidence, competence, and ability to do the activity without being injured. See a heart there. Communicate the risks of energetic injury and discuss fueling strategies. So that risk of, females not having the right amount of nutritional intake for the activity and the long-term damage that can happen. And there's this is an area where there's new and improved research, specifically focusing in on the differences for girls, especially in those the early onset of puberty and adolescence. This is a really key area that we do need to pay attention to. And then lastly, looking out for social isolation and developing positive team dynamics. All right, so we made it to our scenario. I'm doing good for time, aren't I, Vanessa?
Yes, you are. And I appreciate that hugely. So we have a really good chunk of time that we can dedicate to this scenario. I'm going to be breaking the group up into groups of roughly 5 or 6. So if you could take the opportunity right now to read the scenario, or Gabrielle, while I'm getting set up, you could read the scenario.
Yeah.
And then I'll throw some questions in the chat that we're looking for you to answer. So the first one being, what is the underlying issue? Who do you need to consult? Because we know how important consultation is in advancing gender equity in sport and recreation. And then what are some of the things that you can do to measure those results? So maybe you've put something in place to address the scenario. How do you know if you're achieving that positive result? So I'll get the breakout room set out and I'll populate those questions in the chat. And Gabrielle, if you could read the scenario, that'd be awesome.
Thanks, Vanessa. For those of you, if you do have any tech issues, you can send Vanessa a message or throw it in the chat. So our scenario for you today is you're a program leader. Toward the end of your last program cycle or session, you notice that the attendance of girls in your co-ed recreation program, an example would be a multi-sport, has drastically decreased. When you asked one of your participants why fewer girls were attending, she explained that the boys at school don't pass, or the boys don't pass, and a number of the girls were bullying each other at school. The majority of the girls register again for the upcoming program session. How do you plan for this next program cycle knowing this? And so again, the questions that we're going to ask you to dig into are, what are some of these underlying issues that you can identify? Who do you need to consult to understand this better and to create some solutions? And also, how can you track if this change has made a positive impact? So when you're going to be put into these breakout rooms, I'm so not techie. Jared's probably laughing at me right now. And then when we invite you back, it's important to note that when you enter the breakout room, you're going to be on mute. So you need to unmute yourself. And then when you come back into the main room, you'll need to unmute yourself again. Actually, yeah, I think we'll keep you muted until you come back in. And we do want to hear from you. So if there is someone within the group who is willing to speak up or share in the chat, we do want to hear back some of what you brainstormed in the group. And I think we have, we're going to keep you in your chat room for about 5 minutes. Is that correct, Vanessa? Yeah, awesome. So I'll probably see you in there.
All right, breakout rooms are open. See you in 5 minutes. All right, Gabrielle, I haven't immediately added you to a breakout room. I am just a bit concerned. I want to get your time and your sound and your video in the same one. So just keep in mind that you have to accept on both and then you have to return from both.
And there's a button for me to return, correct?
Yes, I'm just not sure what that looks like on your phone.
Okay. How many breakout rooms are there?
There are 6. Alternatively, I can come and go, and we could just keep it. I could just have you here, and we'll make it a little bit easier on ourselves.
Yeah. What? Yeah.
Okay. I'm in. I'll pop in and out.
Okay.
And then if you just want to hang tight, that would be great.
Awesome.
You're doing a really phenomenal job. I appreciate so much that you're sticking to the time, and I've already gotten some positive feedback from CPRA about your rec examples, but also specific to Nova Scotia. So, yay.
Thanks.
Okay, I will be back in a moment, or maybe in a bit.
Okay, good luck.
Thank you.
How's it going?
Hey, Gabrielle, I'm not seeing your video. Are you turned off? Oh, awesome. Amazing. So everybody should be coming back shortly. That time really flew by. I only got to 2 breakout rooms. But we'll facilitate through the chat, or people can unmute themselves.
And can you remind me how many groups we had?
We had 6. And I believe everybody's back now.
Awesome.
Yep.
Welcome back from your breakout rooms. I hope there was water on a table on the side. I'm really missing the Recreation Nova Scotia conference this year and getting to see people in person, but I hope I really thank Vanessa for creating these opportunities for you to engage in smaller settings, the breakout rooms. So we'd love to hear back from you around those 3 questions. I'm aware that there were 6 different breakout rooms, and maybe we'll touch on a couple of those questions with a couple of those groups, but at the end of this, I would really like to hear from each group. So we'll hit it off by, and feel free to, Vanessa, do you need to unmute people, or can people unmute themselves?
No, people can unmute themselves.
Okay, so feel free if you would rather throw your response in the chat box, or if you would like to share with the greater group, we'd love to hear from you. So again, what is the underlying issue that your group identified from this scenario? Or I should say, or issues. Not all at once.
This is Claudine.
The first one is that the boys were not passing the ball to the girls, and that they're bullying each other at school. And so the ball passing is an obvious one. You know, you can address that as a team, but you don't know necessarily what they were being bullied about at school, whether it was directly related to participation in that activity or whether there was other factors influencing that. But that would be something to address as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Jared. Can we hear from another group on that?
This is Claudine. I was in group 1. I'd say the underlying issue is often in team sports, especially as people get older, they tend to boys practice together and girls practice together. And then when there's a co-ed group, they only tend to do things with each other. So maybe the boys not passing is just habit. They know each other and how they play, and so they pass to each other. So maybe what needs to happen is that a rule gets put in place to change the rules a bit. That rule gets put in place is that you have to pass the ball to two girls before any scoring can take place.
Okay, so we're starting to hear about some of the how would you address it. So, you know, developing a rule or an opportunity that encourages and almost forces, nudges or enforces that sharing of the ball or participation. Let's hear from a group that we haven't heard from around some of whether it's that issue or another issue that you identified on who do you need to consult and how would you approach some of the issues that came out of this scenario?
Hey, it's Sally.
Hey, Sally.
Hey. So we talked about consulting teachers and even having kind of broader group discussions with the participants themselves. But in response to the last discussion, I just wanted to point out that like one of the beauties of co-ed programming is that it includes everyone, and so when you're getting into passing to girls and boys, it can get less inclusive for non-binary and non-binary folks. So it's a risk that you would take, I think, like dividing it up girls, boys. In terms of passing.
Sally,
yeah.
not to put you on the spot, but I will.
Yeah, that's okay.
Is there any approaches that you would think of that could address that without adding that almost gender pegging or forcing people to be put into a gender? So is there another approach that it could encourage that, you know, equal and equitable participation in the activity?
Yeah, well, we talked about like changing the types of games as well. So less sort of win-lose types of games. And then, and depending on what the nature of the program it is, like if it's a multi-sport or a multi-activity program, like more kinds of problem-solving games or that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, we talked about patterns as well. So it's not that we said don't pass to, you know, do the girl boy or pass in a pattern, because we discussed that too. It's just you could, you know, like you could divide up into color teams or that kind of thing. Like there's lots of ways, I guess, but
yeah, there's
that help. The other thing was like have I don't know how many like food security is an issue in a lot of communities. So when you're talking about moods and bullying and things like that, you could start with everyone having something to eat together.
That's a great connection activity. To hear from one of the last groups, I'd love to hear. So, you know, we talked about some of the issues and some different approaches and being very thoughtful, and thank you for bringing that intersectional lens to it, Sally. Can we hear from one more group on who would you go to get more information from to help form your approach on this?
Hey Gabs, I can go for group 2. It's Kate.
Hey Kate.
Hey, so we spend a lot of time talking about relationships. And I think that fits into who you would kind of consult and speak with. But hopefully, since this is kind of the last program cycle, you would have developed some pretty good relationships within your group of participants to know kind of who might be the ringleader in some of these behaviors, and maybe consulting with them around, you know, why this might be taking place and who, how we might be able to include people more. So you might know kind of the bottom end of that totem pole and the top end. So, you know, consulting with them. Obviously, hopefully you would also have some other staff that you're working with. So are you guys all seeing the same things? Are you seeing something differently? Maybe they might have some more insight. And then obviously, I think people touched on teachers in the school environment. That would be a good one as well, as far as who you can consult. And then maybe if you had another coworker in another region, maybe you knew of a program that was taking place, if you could reach out and see if they've had the same issue. You know, a lot of us are running very similar programs. They might change a little bit, but I think this is all a problem we've come into before. So if we can reach out to someone else for an idea or a suggestion, especially for some of these team building and relationship stuff, I think it might be helpful to do that as well.
Awesome. And I apologize that we can't hear from everyone today. We do want to leave some room for questions at the end. But I mean, you've all hit on some really key points around different ways of approaching who you consult, and again, you know, ensuring that it is reflective of the girls involved and the boys involved in the program. Because at the end of the day, you know, you could build the most amazing program with all the right ingredients, and there could be some really key things that take away from the experience of the participants. And you know, what is it all for if it's not for everyone feeling welcome and involved? So with that said, thank you all for your contributions. For reflection, so hopefully today you've had an opportunity, whether it's a refresher or you're hearing this for the first time, to hear some of the barriers girls face and what you can change, and as well linking you to some really incredible resources. We hope you consider some of the factors that influence girls' socialization and some of those intersecting identities on how they learn and participate in the program, and that you advocate for equity for girls in physical activity, sport, and recreation. This is an area that we do still need to mind the gap and pay attention to. And again, that goes from the participant to the leader to the decision maker. We need to create the awareness and continue the conversation and be part of action. And lastly, we hope that you've been able to better understand some pathways for girls to stay involved in physical activity throughout their lifespan.
Now we have some time for questions. So please feel free, you can ask your questions in a couple of ways. So if you want to raise your hand to be unmuted, you can do that. You can otherwise add your questions to the chat, or Gabrielle, my, and Parks and Recreation's contact will be available for anything that you want to follow up with that maybe needs to be taken offline or part of a bigger conversation, since we have about 5 minutes for questions right now. But I'll keep my eyes on the chat, and feel free to raise your hand to be unmuted. As we're waiting for some of those questions to come in,
Awesome.
if you want to speak to this, Gabrielle, and I'll speak to the granting opportunities that follow in the next slide.
Awesome. So we do want to create the opportunity to hear from you with some questions on today. But we also want to highlight there's a lot of incredible work happening in this province. Again, a big shout out to Canadian Parks and Rec and Recreation Nova Scotia for zoning in on this being an important topic to talk about. One of the regional networks that I was referring to is the Valley Female Leadership Network. They're having an event coming up and continual events as part of the Shattering the Glass Females in Sport and Recreation Leadership Conference. So November 21st to December 8th. Really incredible, and I can speak to some of these speakers because I've had a chance to hear them in the past. Incredible speakers, an incredible conversation, and again, a huge thank you for our sector really pivoting and making these opportunities for learning and for curiosities and to leading to really important action. Pivoting in a time where it's a lot of these resources are already challenged. I mean, a lot of these organizations are nonprofits themselves. So thank you for continuing to make these opportunities accessible for Nova Scotians. So big shout out to Sport Nova Scotia, the Valley Female Leadership Network, Canadian Sports Centre Atlantic, and the province of Nova Scotia.
So Melissa Sullivan has just added the free registration link to the chat, which is awesome. Thanks for that, Melissa. I'll add that to our follow-up email as well. And then, if you want to speak to this, Gabrielle, I know we're pressed for time, and I'll talk about the grants immediately after.
Yeah, I mean, how could I not throw this quote in there? It's so timely. And it just gives me chills. There's so many things, but the quote says it itself. Kamala, you may be the first to do many things, but make sure you're not the last. So it's this wonderful attitude and opportunity of women to be raising each other up. And I'm sure we will see more wonderful and inspiring things.
Phenomenal. So lastly, before we shut it down, there are 2 grants available right now. One has a tight deadline of 11:59 p.m. Eastern tonight. So that's 1 a.m. where you are, I believe. So this is through Canadian Women in Sports WISE Fund. This is a micro grant of $2,500 dedicated to advancing gender equity in sport. I've added my email there directly so that you can ping me if you have any questions in filling it out right now. Because it's a micro grant, it is really not a laborious application process. So it's about 5 questions. And it's pretty expansive what you can do with that funding. So really anything that aligns with advancing gender equity in sport and recreation would be eligible. Just a couple of things like, not spending the money on alcohol and those things that you probably wouldn't anyway. CPRA also has the Gender Equity and Recreational Sport Community Grant Initiatives. These are bigger ticket items, so up to $15,000 to address barriers to participation, and that application is live until December 11th. So you have a little over a month left to apply to that, and the information on both of these grants will be made available in the follow-up email. So I will put this in the chat right now, or you can use the QR code, but we are looking for your feedback on this experience. We take your feedback really seriously, and we want to make this learning opportunity as beneficial to the community as possible so that girls and women and all participants can really benefit from it. Again, it's not a long survey, so if you could please take a moment to do that, we'd really appreciate it. So you can find a link to that in the chat or use the QR code on here. And that is it. I really want to thank Gabrielle for delivering this content and really contextualizing it within Nova Scotia. I think you did a phenomenal job. Thank you to CPRA who assisted with the development of this content. And thank you everyone for taking your time today and spending it with us. Like Gabrielle said, there are so many virtual opportunities right now, and you chose to be here with us, so we really appreciate that and hope that you take this knowledge, implement it, share it with the people in your network, and please reach out if you have any questions. Gabrielle, any final words from you?
Just to thank you. I really encourage everyone, like, these conversations are really important. I hope we all have learned, especially in this year, it's so important to listen, to learn, but then to act. So let's see this translated into some actions, and it could be something small that you start today, but it's that first step, and that you're not alone in this work. There's incredible leaders across the province. And the last thing I'll leave you with is, this is continual work, and the last thing you want to be doing is just resting in good intentions here. Thank you for coming, and I look forward to seeing some of the work that you bring to life. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.